Imagine this scenario. You're at work, okay, and your boss asks you to stay a little late, finish up a report. Simple enough, right? You're a team player. But then next week, she asks you to change just one number in that report. Just tweak it a bit. Make the quarterly outlook seem a little brighter for the shareholders. No one will really get hurt, right? So where is the line? And maybe more importantly, how often do we cross it, maybe without even realizing? We all like to think of ourselves as, independent, moral people, unshakable integrity. But some pretty surprising psychological research suggests our built-in wiring, our tendency to obey, is way more powerful than we'd probably like to admit. Today on The Deep Dive, we're digging into a, frankly, deeply unsettling corner of human psychology, our obedience to authority. And our guide for this exploration is Dr. Evelyn Reed, a social psychologist. She's the author of The Agentic State and specializes in social compliance and cognitive dissonance. Thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure. It's definitely a topic that warrants a closer look.
Absolutely. Now, when we talk about obedience today, so much of our understanding seems to come back to one incredibly famous series of experiments. Can you take us back to the 1960s, Stanley Milgram's lab? What was he really trying to figure out?
Yeah, you really have to understand the context. It was the aftermath of World War II, right? The Nuremberg trials were fresh.
Yeah.
And you had all these Nazi officials using the defense. Befehl is befehl, and order is an order. So Milgram, he was a psychologist at Yale then, he wondered, were these people just uniquely evil? Or could ordinary people, people like you and me, be pushed into doing terrible things just by authority? He wanted to test it empirically.
Right. So he sets up this experiment, pretty ingenious though, ethically complicated perhaps, to see if an average person would follow orders, even really questionable ones. What did that actually look like for someone walking into his lab?
Well, he recruited a range of men, teachers, engineers, postal workers, everyday guys. They were told it was a study about memory and learning. That was the cover story. Each participant got assigned the role of teacher, and then an actor who was in on it played the learner, the teacher's job, read word pairs. And if the learner got one wrong, they had to give him a shock from this machine.
Okay, and this shock generator, it wasn't just some cardboard box, right? It looked legit.
Oh, completely. Very convincing. A solid metal box, 30 switches in a row, labeled clearly, 15 volts, 30 volts, all the way up to 450. And the labels themselves got more intense. Slave shock, strong shock, and then the last two, just ominously marked XXX. Participants absolutely believed it was real, no question.
Wow, okay. And the learner, the actor, what was the teacher hearing from him as these supposed shocks increased?
So the learner's reactions were pre-recorded, played back at specific voltage levels. It started small, like a grunt. But then at 120 volts, he'd shout it was painful. At 150 volts, he'd cry out, "Get me out of here, my heart's bothering me." Then more desperate protests as it went higher. And then, after the 330-volt shock, complete silence, just nothing.
Oh, man. It's hard to even imagine being in that chair thinking you're causing that kind of pain. Maybe worse. What kept them going? What was the authority figure, the experimenter, doing?
This is really the crux of it. The experimenter, just the guy in a gray lab coat, was incredibly calm, never raised his voice, never threatened. If the teacher hesitated, showed reluctance, he used a sequence of 4 verbal prods, just simple phrases like, "Oh, please continue." Then the experimenter requires that you continue. Oh, then it is absolutely essential that you continue. And the final one, you have no other choice, you must go on. Just calm, steady, authoritative assertion.
Okay, so you have this escalating pressure, this belief you're causing real harm, and this calm authority fish insisting you continue. How many people actually went all the way? To that final 450-volt switch, what were the results?
The results were, well, they were stunning. Completely unexpected. Beforehand, Milgram asked psychiatrists, predict the outcome. They figured maybe 1%, the sort of sadistic French, would go to 450 volts.
Well,
The reality, 65%.
Yeah.
Nearly 2/3 of the participants administered the full 450-volt shock.
65%. Wow, that's a difficult number to really process. So does that mean these people were cruel or unfeeling, like those psychiatrists predicted?
No, and that's absolutely crucial. These were not psychopaths.
Yeah.
They showed extreme signs of stress, internal conflict, sweating, trembling, stuttering, groaning. Many argued with the experimenter, pleaded to stop. But when faced with that calm, persistent instruction, the majority still flipped the switch. Milgram's explanation for this was what he termed the agentic state.
The agentic state. So it's not just simple obedience. It's like a mental shift, a reframing of who you are in that moment.
Exactly. It's a shift where you cease to see yourself as the one acting. You see yourself as an instrument, an agent carrying out the wishes of someone else, someone you perceive as a legitimate authority figure.
And this allows you to kind of sidestep responsibility.
Precisely. It allows for the abdication of personal responsibility. Your internal thinking changes. It's not, I am doing this terrible thing. It becomes, I'm just following orders. The scientist is responsible.
Mm.
This resolves the huge cognitive dissonance that clash between I'm a good person and I'm causing harm.
Hmm.
It's psychologically easier in that moment to defer responsibility than to actually stop the action, to defy authority.
It's chilling to think about in the lab, but these dynamics, they don't just stay in the lab, do they? They seem to echo pretty strongly in the real world, especially when you look at, say, high-demand groups or cults.
Oh, absolutely. Cults are, in many ways, a tragic, real-world laboratory for these very principles, often taken to an extreme.
Yeah.
You have a charismatic leader who cultivates this incredibly powerful authority, often seen as infallible, maybe even divine. And they use essentially the same toolkit Milgram observed, just amplified.
What does that toolkit look like in that kind of group setting?
Well, first, there's almost always gradual commitment. The slippery slope idea. Nobody joins on day one and is asked to do the most extreme thing. It starts small, attend an extra meeting, volunteer some time, then it escalates, maybe donate some money,
Hmm.
change your diet, how you dress, cut off contact with family who are critical. Each step you take makes it psychologically harder to say no to the next one. You're already invested.
Right, you're slowly drawn in. What else?
Second big one is control of information. The group becomes this total echo chamber. Followers are often isolated, physically sometimes, but definitely intellectually. Any outside information, news, opinions from friends, family concerns gets labeled dangerous, corrupt, fake news, whatever. This just reinforces the leaders as the only source of truth, just like the experimenter was the sole authority in the lab.
Okay, so you've got the gradual steps, the controlled information. How does that agentic state, that shifting of responsibility, fit in?
It's absolutely central. The group provides this powerful ideology, right? A higher purpose. It could be anything saving the world, achieving enlightenment, preparing for the end times. This grand mission justifies everything. Any order from the leader, no matter how strange or difficult, seems necessary for this greater good. So the follower becomes an agent of this cause. They feel their own moral concerns kind of fade away because they're part of something huge, something historic. It makes things that would normally be unthinkable seem not just okay, but actually necessary.
It's a powerful combination. Now, okay, most of us listening probably aren't going to join a group like that. But we do have jobs. We have bosses. How do these same ideas show up, maybe more subtly, in a typical office?
Oh, the parallels are definitely there, and often completely missed. The authority figure isn't wearing a lab coat, it's your manager, or maybe the corporation itself. And they hold power
Right.
over your paycheck, your career path. The obedience isn't about electric shocks, thankfully, but the pressures are similar in kind, if not degree. That example you started with, fudging numbers on a report, that's a classic.
Yeah.
But it can be much subtler. Think about a workplace culture that, say, glorifies burnout. There's no direct order to work until 10 p.m. or answer emails on Sunday, but there's this unspoken pressure. Everyone else is doing it. It's a form of social compliance, obeying the norm. Or think about groupthink in a meeting. The boss suggests something you know is a bad idea. Maybe others feel it too.
Yeah.
But nobody speaks up. Why? You're obeying an unspoken rule. Don't challenge the boss. Don't rock the boat.
And that idea you mentioned earlier, cognitive dissonance, and also diffusion of responsibility, that must play a huge role in big organizations.
Huge. Diffusion of responsibility is massive in large companies. Think about a questionable decision. Maybe it's a marketing campaign, a new policy. It goes through legal, it goes through marketing, finance signs off, operations looks at it. By the time the decision is actually made or the thing is launched, maybe dozens of people have touched it, signed off on their little piece. So who's actually responsible for the overall decision? Nobody feels like they made the final call. Everyone was just, doing their job, handling their section. They become these little agents in a big machine. And because of that, nobody feels fully accountable for the final outcome, even if it turns out to be harmful or unethical.
Okay, hearing all this, it could sound pretty discouraging, like we're just sort of programmed to follow orders, even bad ones. But we're not just puppets. Let's shift to solutions. How can we push back? How do we reclaim that sense of agency?
Yes, this is absolutely the crucial takeaway. We are not helpless. There are definite strategies. And the first one, maybe the most powerful, is simply awareness. Just understanding the Milgram experiment, knowing what the agentic state is, acts like a kind of psychological vaccine. Once you can recognize the pressure, put a name to it, oh, okay, this feeling, this is that agentic shift trying to happen, you immediately reduce its power, its invisible power. Knowledge really is the first defense.
Okay, so awareness is like our vaccine. Once we're aware, what can we actively do in that moment of pressure?
The second step is to use constructive questioning. And notice I say constructive. This isn't about being insubordinate or confrontational. It's about using clarifying questions. Questions that pause the action, introduce a moment of reflection for both you and the authority figure. Simple things like, could you help me understand the larger goal we're trying to achieve here? Or maybe, is there another way we could get this result that might align better with our company values? It respectfully shifts it from just taking an order to like collaborative problem solving. It buys you time, and it subtly requires them to justify the command.
That's smart. It creates space to think. And you mentioned earlier, allies are really important. How does that work in practice?
Oh, it's incredibly powerful. Strategy 3, find an ally. You cannot overestimate this. Milgram actually ran variations of his study. In one, the real participant was joined by two actors who refused to continue shocking the learner. When the participants saw others defying the experimenter, guess what happened to the obedience rate? It plummeted, down to just 10%.
Wow, from 65 down to 10, just by seeing someone else resist.
Exactly. If just one other person validates your concerns, shares your unease, it can give you enormous courage to break ranks. So if something feels wrong at work, talk to a colleague you trust. You might be surprised to find you're not the only one feeling it.
That shows the real power of solidarity, even just one other person. Okay, is there anything else, something maybe more proactive we can do before we're even in that pressure cooker?
Yes, definitely. A final step is pre-commitment. This is about deciding ahead of time. Take some quiet time when you're not under pressure and really define your own ethical boundaries. Ask yourself honestly, what am I not willing to do for my job? What action would make me feel ashamed? Maybe even write it down. Make that commitment to yourself when you're calm and clear-headed. Think of it as an anchor. It makes it so much easier to hold firm when that storm of pressure hits later on. Ultimately, resisting unjust authority starts by granting authority to your own conscience first.
Okay, so let's quickly recap those strategies. Be aware, know the psychology, ask constructive questions, create space, find an ally, there's strength in numbers, and pre-commit, know your lines before they're tested. This has been incredibly illuminating and, yeah, definitely a bit unsettling too. Thank you.
It was my pleasure. It's a conversation we really need to be having.
For sure. And, obedience itself isn't bad. It's kind of the grease that keeps society moving. It lets us build cities, run hospitals, cooperate on huge scales, but it is a powerful tool. And like any tool, it can build amazing things or it can cause terrible destruction. The real test, maybe, isn't whether we do the order, it's whether we choose to question it when necessary. That line between duty and defiance, that's something we all have to figure out how to walk. So the final question for you listening, would you push the final switch if someone told you to? The research suggests most of us would. Something to think about.